being in itself almost, I've always heard that and interpreted it as like being in itself is almost reducing a being down to its utility, right? That it's like,
Yeah.
oh, a table is being in itself just a table. And
Yeah, a
so if
table
it,
is never being for itself, I don't
right.
think. I don't think it's ever like
No.
trying to transcend its physical existence,
Right. I think
by
like
creating goals and stuff.
yeah. Well, because like consciousness is also like foundationally necessary for being
Yeah.
for itself, I believe. Um,
Yeah.
and so
I hope I'm getting the jargon right,
I
but
think I think we are. I think we are.
it's easy to mix up.
It is because they're
Um,
so similar. But it's like then in being for itself, there is something that feels kind of like, okay, well then we have to define the self, like, and is there some aspect of a consciousness being for itself that is also performing for the self, for the
yeah,
like personality or ego? So how do you
absolutely.
actually like separate performance from
I don't think you
any of
can
this?
personally.
Really?
Um,
Okay, tell me
because like
more.
there is in a sense like two, not two selves, but like two dimensions of self, I guess. Like there's the acting self that it's like, I guess you could say animals have that as well, where it's like based on just willing. And then the reflective, intuiting self, where it's sort of like self-reflexive in nature. Like the part of the self that's conscious of having any particular experience, you know?
Yeah.
Like I'm not just talking on a podcast, I'm experiencing myself talking on a podcast,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
just the nature of self-consciousness. But I don't think it's possible to separate the
Yeah.
two, like in terms of like, I'm just doing my thing, I'm willing, I'm living authentically, and then, oh no, people are here. I guess I'll have to reduce myself to just an object in there. Like, I don't think that's
Right.
how it works.
Right. Because I think
I think there's an
also,
interplay of the two.
yeah. And I think even internally, I kind of have this thing that's like, oh, if I'm just like being for myself, there is a difference in being for myself and like kind of indulging and having a chill, relaxed day that is just like, oh, I'm going to sleep in and stay in bed and I'm being for myself versus no, like, do something that future you will be proud of and like get up and be productive. It's like, those are
Yeah.
also, they, at least to me, experientially feel very different, but
Yes.
both are kind of being for myself. But
Yeah.
one feels a little bit more performative in that, like, it's the long term validation of, okay, you got to put on this performance of like doing these things right now. But then
Yeah.
eventually, like, you enjoy it, right? And you get into the flow of it and the rhythm of it.
Yeah.
So I suppose within that, one question that the interview presupposes that I thought was really, really interesting.
Mhm.
Well, I guess the interview doesn't presuppose, but it kind of starts with is that the interviewer, they're talking about this idea of like creating self as a work of art. And
Mhm.
Foucault kind of says, you know, with the Sartrean idea of we're not given the self, we
Mhm.
must create the self as a work of art. And I was kind of like, okay, are we not given the self or are we given the self? Even if that self is given to us by the self. I
Yeah.
don't
Do we
know.
want to read? Can I read the quote? Is
Yeah,
that
please,
okay?
please, please.
Just to kind of contextualize it for
Yeah.
viewers and us as well. Um, let's see, where should we start? I think that the only acceptable practical consequence of what Sartre has said is to link his theoretical insight to the practice of creativity, and not that of authenticity. From the idea that the self is not given to us, I think that there is only one practical consequence. We have to create ourselves as a work of art. It is interesting to see that Sartre refers to the work of creation to a certain relation to oneself, the author to himself, which has the form of authenticity or inauthenticity. I would like to say exactly the contrary. We should not have to refer the creative activity of somebody to the kind of relation he has to himself, but should relate the kind of relation one has to oneself to a creative activity. Interesting stuff. But yeah, maybe we should start with the first idea. I guess taking this idea that if there's no self, like if the grounds of self is nothing, really, and we have to make it something ourselves, should we, I guess, take from that authenticity is, I guess, the best way to go about dealing with that presupposition or whatever you want to call it, or is it creativity?
Yeah. I think it's,
Yeah,
for me, almost impossible to say, like, oh, if we're starting from nothing, authenticity, because it's like, well, authentic to what? Like, what is actually being authentic? There would have to be some kind of substance that exists in order for authenticity to, like,
yeah,
authenticity isn't generative. It's like just it just kind of exists in relationship to the thing that is being authentic, whereas creativity is generating something new. And so it's like, okay, if we're starting with the idea that we are given nothing to form the self, I do think that it makes sense that creativity is the only logical choice that follows. But the idea that authenticity could be a choice makes me want to question that presupposition of not being given anything for the self. Because, I mean, kind of
yeah,
colloquially, anecdotally, we hear parents say, like, oh, and like babies come out with their personality. You already know who they're going to be,
yeah,
you know, or like argument for genetics, right? That like that
right.
impacts some sense of self. And if authenticity is a reaction to this, well, are we not given any self? Is there some self that we are kind of born with? Born as you're like birthing
Sorry, I thought
yourself
I
through
could do that like
conception.
still. Yeah, I'm trying to like symbolize what we're
Yeah.
talking about,
It's
like
actually
coming into the
deeply
world.
symbolic and artistic, might I add.
I was trying to be sneaky. I guess I can't do that if it's like literally just me on my camera.
That's so funny.
Um, yeah, I don't know. I think for me, when I start thinking about uh, the first part of that statement, like the grounds of our being nothing, I think that takes us into a whole other can of worms. But I mean, I guess in like a not a metaphysical sense, but more an existentialist sense, you can say that the grounds of our being are nothing because, or in the sense that there's nothing in the material world or our material biological lifetimes that will confirm or deny whether the meaning we've given our lives actually is at all, whether the truth we have assigned to things or the meaning of life that we have given it is actually there.
Yeah,
I would say probably not. I mean, it's like not like a capital T truth, but like a lowercase t truth, you know? Not in a
sure.
postmodernist sense, by the way. Like we do have like a shared understanding of things, but in the sense that it's not really possible to know.
Yeah. In a more like, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, don't let me put words in your mouth, but like almost like existentialist way that
Yeah.
is, well, considering nihilism, we'll never really know if that's true or
Yeah.
not. But given our evidence of that maybe being true, we should do this, right?
Yes.
Um,
Like let's not stop at the nihilist mindset, you know. We can go beyond that.
yeah.
And I mean, it's kind of like the progression of nihilism to existentialism. And I think it's definitely better than nihilism in terms of its practicality, living a life.
Yeah.
Nihilism isn't super practical, but I think existentialism often falls into a lot of shortcomings by taking up this idea of authenticity. For one thing, I feel like a lot of existentialist philosophers neglect the fact that authenticity is something, it's not like like a platonic form that just exists. Like it's relative to time and place, like
Yeah.
culture. Like for example, like women back in the days who could only publish under like a fake male name, like that's I would say that's authentic. They're not
Yeah.
authentically putting their work forward as their own, but they're living within the constraints that they're given, like trying to push beyond the constraints of their life.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's really, yeah.
It'd be pretty shitty to look at that and be like, well, they weren't authentic. And it's like,
Yeah, I'm like,
okay.
yeah. But if a woman were to do that today, it would be seen as a lot more questionable. I don't think as many people, I think that it would be more subject to doubt whether that's an authentic choice. You know, like
Yeah.
what you think women aren't, why would you think your work needs to be under a male's name, you know?
Right. Right.
So that's kind of a problem I've come to have with existentialism.
Yeah. I think that's interesting too. With like at the end, I guess this is jumping past that little interesting middle bit. So if we kind of grant the supposition that we're not given the self for the sake of this argument today, and I do think that there is still, even if we're given any part of self, I would probably still argue that creativity is still a better path forward
Yeah,
than authenticity. But
I think so too.